Hello and welcome to the new episode of Around the World in 7 Days. My name is Pooja and I am here to present you some stories related to important global events. In this segment, we shall analyze two international stories of the past week. First of all, we shall discuss about the economic impact of Russia-Ukraine war and speculations about a global recession. Secondly, we shall understand the implications of recently held 2+2 dialogue between India and the US. Several concerns are being raised regarding the impact of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Russia had invaded Ukraine in February 2022. One of the prominent concerns has been how the outcome of the war will affect the global economy. Speculations are rife with the fear that it will disturb the whole world and once again a global economic recession will prevail. However, some experts believe that the global economy will flourish as usual in 2022 despite the war. It is also being believed that this war will definitely disturb the world economy, but its impact will be restrained. On the other hand, it is being feared that severe economic sanctions that were imposed on Russia at the very onset of war can also contribute to economic recession. Russia was even removed from SWIFT banking system. Also, the US has completely banned energy imports from Russia. Crude oil prices skyrocketed due to this move against Russia as it exports energy to the world of Europe. Oil prices in the international market have reached the same level as they were at the time of global economic recession in 2008. It is even being speculated that crude oil prices can reach $300 per barrel owing to the ongoing war. Today, we will try to understand what an economic recession is, what are the factors behind an economic recession, why is the global recession being talked about at present, and we will also discuss whether there has ever been an economic slowdown in India. Let us first of all try to understand the recent issue. Russia ranks third globally in terms of crude oil production after the US and Saudi Arabia. However, Russia is the second largest crude oil exporting country in the world. According to data, Russia produced about 10.5 million barrels of oil and exported 5 to 6 million barrels oil per day in 2020. Out of this, Russia exported about 50% of the total oil to Europe. Europe is dependent on Russia for about 30% of its total crude oil needs. In such a scenario, when Britain announced to ban oil imports from Russia till the end of 2022, and the US did the same with immediate effect, Brent oil prices skyrocketed. Moreover, experts opine that the pace of global economic growth is likely to be sluggish. It is estimated that the pace of global economic growth will decrease by 0.2% due to the ongoing war. It means that the growth rate will come down to 3.8% from 4%. However, it is subject to the duration of the war. It is being presumed that the growth rate will be sluggish as the oil importing countries are affected by the rise in price of the crude oil. Inflation starts rising in the oil importing countries due to increase in oil prices. The price of essential commodities also rises. It implies that inflation is directly related to oil prices. Stagflation is also likely to ramp up with the rise in oil prices. Stagflation is a situation when inflation becomes severe and the economy slows down. A country's economy comes to a standstill during stagflation and it affects the GDP negatively. The World Bank, in its recent report, has forecasted a decline of 45.1% in Ukraine's economy. The World Bank has stated that war against Ukraine and subsequent economic sanctions on Russia have begun to impinge the global economy. The bank has estimated that emerging markets and developing countries in Europe and Central Asian region may have to bear the brunt of the war. This is so because businesses are shutting down in Ukraine due to the war and in Russia owing to the economic sanctions. It is causing a decline in the exports and production capacities. According to the World Bank, the Russian economy has already fallen into a deep recession due to the sanctions imposed by the US and Western countries. Russia's production is likely to decrease by 11.2% in 2022. Now the question remains that why the global economy will be affected by the Russian-Ukraine war. Inflation will increase due to rise in oil prices, and food items will also become expensive due to the war. The factor behind that is that both Russia and Ukraine are major agricultural producers. Russia and Ukraine are major producers of wheat. As per an estimate, Russia and Ukraine account for 14% of the total wheat production in the world. Both these countries are also major producers and exporters of corn and sunflower oil. Hence, if these countries face challenges in exporting their agricultural products, then it will directly impact the Middle East and Africa. Turkey, Egypt, and Lebanon meet their substantial wheat needs by importing wheat from these two countries. African countries like Algeria, Sudan, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa are also dependent on these two countries for their grain requirements. It means that the Russia-Ukraine war will disturb these countries too. This was all about the present scenario, due to which economic recession has become the talk of the town. Now, let us understand the factors behind an economic recession. Economic recession is a vicious cycle of the economy in which a country's economic growth comes to a halt and its development slows down. As per another definition, if the GDP of a country remains in negative for 2 consecutive quarters, that is, if the GDP declines instead of increasing, then it is considered as a slowdown. For example, if a country has ample amount of goods, but its citizens do not have money to purchase those goods, then such a situation is known as an economic recession. In such a situation, the industrial hub starts collapsing and the people working in these industries become unemployed. Consequently, the purchasing power of the country already facing economic recession reduces further. Economic activities come to a slump due to the recession. Income of the masses, industrial production, wholesale retail sales, and employment register decline. If the downturn lasts for a longer duration, then businesses and banks also start collapsing. However, to break the cycle, the concerned government resorts to a deficit economy and tries to improve the economy by increasing cash flow in the market so that the purchasing power of the people can be increased. The GDP growth rate had come down to 5% in the first quarter of 2019. These figures were considered to be the worst in the last 6 years. The growth rate of 8 cardinal manufacturing industries shrank to 3%. During this period, the demand for automobiles and daily goods declined. It was also being speculated that India would suffer from an economic recession. However, post-independence, India has witnessed economic recessions in 1991 and 2008. The major factor for the 1991 recession was the payment crisis. There was a sharp decline in imports during this period as India's global currency reserves were almost depleted. India also had to face recession owing to the global recession in 2008. In the decade of the 90s, the Federal Reserve Bank of America had drastically reduced the interest rate on loans for purchasing houses. Actually, citizens were motivated to borrow loans for purchasing houses. During this period, people started purchasing houses in large numbers and consequently, the property market boomed in the US. On one hand, the US economy continued to grow at a faster pace till 2006. But on the other hand, the competitive power of the US continued to decline at a rapid pace. The 2008 economic recession initially impacted the US financial system and, resultantly, the price of houses and production declined in the US. It later affected the global economic activities, international banking sectors, and financial markets. As far as the present economic crisis is concerned, the outcome of the Russia-Ukraine war will decide the fate of the global economy. Recently, 2+2 dialogue took place between India and the US. This dialogue was held in Washington, D.C., and the US capital, that is. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar visited the US to attend the dialogue. Both the ministers met the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Also, a virtual meeting was held between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden. 2+2 dialogue has taken place between India and US for the fourth time. Several crucial issues were discussed during this meeting. The US has assured its support for India's permanent membership in the United Nations Security Council and India's inclusion in the NSG, that is, Nuclear Suppliers Group. Now the question remains that for how long will the friendship between India and US last? Why is the US still supporting India despite the fact that India is not supporting the US against Russia? Today, we will discuss these issues, and we will also try to understand what is the 2+2 dialogue and with which countries India has had such dialogues. First of all, let us understand what is the 2+2 dialogue. When there are two ministerial level meetings taking place simultaneously between the two countries, it is called a 2+2 dialogue. 2+2 dialogue is a format of meeting of the foreign and defense ministers of India and its allies on strategic and security issues. 2+2 dialogue between India and the US started in 2018. It has already been mentioned that 2+2 dialogue has been held between India and US 4 times so far. The launch of the dialogue is a reflection of the shared commitment by India and the US to provide a positive vision for the India-US strategic partnership and to promote synergy in their diplomatic and security efforts. It enables the partners to better understand and appreciate each other's strategic concerns and sensitivities by taking into account political factors on both sides. It aims to build a stronger, more integrated strategic relationship in a rapidly changing global environment. Regular ministerial talks are held between India and the US under the 2+2 dialogue system. It is being believed that such dialogues will increase peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region and will further promote strategic discussions between the two countries. India is holding such types of dialogues with other countries too, besides the US. India is also holding such talks with Russia, Japan, and Australia. India's dialogue with Japan had already started in 2019. Such dialogues commenced with Russia and Australia in 2021. Now let us understand what issues were discussed between the two countries. In the recently held meeting, both countries discussed various issues related to the Russia-Ukraine war. The ministers also reviewed mutual efforts to respond to the worsening humanitarian crises in Ukraine and also urged an immediate cessation of hostilities. India and US also reviewed their cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region amid China's growing military activities in the region. However, there were some critical issues upon which India vehemently put forth her stand. When India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar was questioned on increasing oil imports from Russia, he replied that it has been necessary for India's energy security. He also added that it would rather be a befitting question to be asked from Europe, who purchases more oil from Russia. Moreover, the US was asked whether it will impose any sanctions on New Delhi for its purchase of the S-400 missile defense system from Russia. Replying, the US Secretary of State Blinken urged the countries to avoid major weapons purchase from Russia. In such a situation, the question arises that will this camaraderie between India and US last for a longer period? However, it is too early to conclude that the US will stop supporting India. But past experiences suggest that relations between the two countries always turn sour after a period of good friendship. It is so because both the countries fail to trust each other for a longer period. In such a situation, it is quite doubtful that India and US friendship will continue in future. However, the question also arises that if India continues to share a good rapport with the US, then how will it affect India's relation with Russia? Undoubtedly, Russia has always been India's reliable defense ally, and it has always been India's largest export partner. Russia has constantly supported India for decades, while the US-India friendship or relationship has always been full of ups and downs. Therefore, it seems unlikely that India will ignore Russia to maintain relations with the US. For instance, India supported Russia on the US resolutions introduced against Russia recently. Moreover, India avoided allying with any camp during the Russia-Ukraine war. However, India has jolted the US several times. For instance, India did not vote in favor of the US resolution during the voting held in the United Nations. However, India's stand irked the US. Moreover, the US is threatening the whole world not to have any trade ties with Russia. But India has ignored all the US threats. Earlier, India had also purchased S-400 air defense systems from Russia by ignoring various threats issued by the US. The US even contemplated banning India, but the US did not take any action in this regard. Now the question remains why the US could not take any action against India. China is the biggest reason for the US not taking any action against India. The US faces a major challenge in countering China in the Indo-Pacific region. The US would never want China to supersede its dominance in the Indo-Pacific region. The US aims at strengthening its control in the Indo-Pacific region. For this reason, the US has formed the Quad, and it is also strengthening the organization. Although Australia and Japan are also included in the Quad, the US is especially prioritizing India. Hence, the US does not want to disturb its relations with India. Moreover, India also needs the US support to curb China's growing supremacy in South Asia. In short, India and the US relations are mutual and filled with hidden interests. Hence, it will be interesting to witness as to what extent India will be able to strike a balance between Russia and the US. After the major news, let us take a look at other important international news. Brazil's election authority has called for European Union representatives for the first time to oversee the upcoming elections. The move comes after President Jair Bolsonaro raised questions about the legality of Brazil's electronic voting system and fraud in regional elections held in 2020. Voters believe that Bolsonaro has deep ties with Brazil's armed forces. Hence, they are of the view that the president may later refuse to accept the election results. Horn of Africa, which is already on the verge of devastation, is facing the most severe drought in the past 40 years. The region is about to face a famine. Consequently, every day, thousands of people in the region are struggling to quench their hunger. United Nations World Food Programme and UNICEF are urging immediate aid to overcome the gruesome situation prevalent in the region. Horn of Africa is part of East Africa and it is connected to the Indian Ocean coast. Horn of Africa includes Somalia, Ethiopia, Djibouti and Eritrea. It is also known as Somali Peninsula. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are planning to jointly develop gas fields despite Iran's objection. Iran is objecting as the deal violates previously held talks. However, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait stated that they are not violating any point of agreement reached during the talks. As per the talks, they have the right to exploit the natural resources present in this region. Iran and Kuwait have been in talks for several years over a disputed maritime border region, which is rich in natural gas. It is estimated that the region has about 220 billion cubic meters or 7 trillion cubic feet natural gas reserves. Crude oil and gas prices are skyrocketing these days due to Russia's invasion on Ukraine. Former President of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, has warned that Russia will deploy nuclear weapons near the Baltic states and Scandinavia if Finland or Sweden decide to become a member of NATO. Both Finland and Sweden have taken a U-turn on military non-alignment due to Russia's invasion on Ukraine. Finland stated that it would decide during this week whether it will take an initiative for becoming a member of NATO or not. On the other hand, Sweden is still contemplating on becoming a member of NATO. Let's look at our questions for today. Question 1. What is an economic recession? At present, why is it being speculated that the world might face another global economic recession? What is the 2+2 dialogue? Can holding such a dialogue with the US undermine India's ties with Russia? Evaluate.